Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Cash. I help the League of Women Voters of North Carolina with their communications. I am joined today by Jennifer Bremer. She is on the board of the League of Women Voters of North Carolina. And we are doing our third in a series of videos about redistricting, which is top of mind right now in 2021, a redistricting year. Jennifer has a lot of expertise on this topic. So today we're going to talk about, is there a better way to draw our districts? So Jennifer, we know we have to redraw the districts every 10 years after the census so that the redistricts all have about the same number of people despite population change. And we've seen how a sneaky technique called gerrymandering can turn this simple process into a festival of map rigging for the party that is in charge. There has to be a better way to draw our districts. Let's start there, right?
Absolutely. So yeah, absolutely correct. Gerrymandering is cheating, plain and simple. It's a technique that enables the people who are in charge of the map drawing to draw maps to benefit, guess who, themselves, and to really make it much harder for the other party to win. Even if they have more people supporting them, it doesn't matter. You can rig the maps if they're even, or even if the other party has more people by the technique that we discussed in the last video, packing and cracking. So what we need is to get rid of this conflict of interest, because even politicians and elected officials who are well intentioned and sincere and so forth, when they get in that room and they can say, well, I can just move this map, just move this district a little bit this way and pick up some really friendly voters and move this in a little bit to counterbalance that and get rid of those other voters who don't support me, and they both do that, pretty soon you have a very rigged map. Both parties are doing that together. Pretty soon you've got a very rigged map. It's too tempting. We need to help these people by removing this temptation so they don't have the ability to draw themselves safe districts, and also to rig the whole playing field so that it benefits them. So the that's really what we need to do. It's a difficult thing to do because, unlike a lot of states, and this comes as a surprise to many people who moved into the state, we do not have what's called citizen-initiated referendum. In another state, like say Utah, California, whatever, you can pass petitions and collect signatures and put a reform right on the ballot. We can't do that. It was considered back in 1913 and rejected. So that means that the only way we can get reform in a wholesale fashion is really by the legislature. The courts, particularly the Supreme Court, have decided that they will not consider partisan gerrymandering. They will still consider racial gerrymandering. But really, to get reform, we need to have legislation. And as I mentioned in the previous video, we're asking the people who are, basically the vote robbers, to be the ones who are declaring that we need a better system to prevent vote robbing. And that's kind of a challenge, but we believe that we can get it done. So really, the essence of this is to take the drawing out of the hands of the legislature and to put it into the hands of what we call a nonpartisan commission. And when we say nonpartisan, we don't mean that it is entirely filled with angels who don't think about politics and who are perfect in every way. What we mean is that it has a balanced representation from both parties, an equal number, and also from voters who are not aligned with either party. Because even though we know that many of those voters, I'm unaffiliated myself, but I'm not going to say that I'm right in the middle. I'm not. But nonetheless, those voters are a substantial share of our total voting body, and they deserve to be represented in drawing the maps. And they have even less representation than the parties do at the present time. So you want a commission that's balanced. It has the same number of Republicans and Democrats, and has another group that includes unaffiliated and potentially the other parties like the Libertarians and so forth. So then that group then should be drawing the maps, and they should do it in a very, very public and open way where citizens can participate and see what's happening, where they're following strict criteria, and where the process is very well defined, that has steps that people can see what's going to happen, and nothing is going on behind closed doors, not even conversations among the commissioners. And that and to get there, one of the things that's very interesting is that there is no commission in the country, none. There's not a single commission, and there are many states that do have commissions, but there's no nonpartisan commission in the country where the legislative leaders do not have a role in selecting commissioners. Even in California, which is, is California, what can you say? They're going to go to the extreme. The legislative leadership still has the ability to take the pool of people who have applied to be commissioners, and throw out the ones that they don't like, a few of them. And that's true pretty much everywhere. That in the new reform adopted in Virginia, it is a commission. It was passed by the legislature on bipartisan support. A strong support from the Republicans really enabled it to pass in the second year, which they have to do for a constitutional amendment. It does provide a role for the legislature. In fact, half of the commission are sitting legislators, but that is the only commission that has been adopted in the South, and because all of us in the South lack the ability to put something on the ballot by signature. So it depends on finding something that's going to be a compromise, and that will be able to pass the legislature, and that means giving them a role in the process, because we can hope that they would agree to give up half of their role or some of their role, but we have to be realistic that they're unlikely to give up their entire role. That would be ideal, to have something that was entirely selected by the citizens, but that's not going to happen. But we hope to get some reform this year, and some reform will be better than no reform. It will be a down payment on getting to a more complete reform, which we think can also happen later in the decade as the demography in the state moves to make it more difficult to draw a gerrymander.
And so maps that have been drawn by nonpartisan commissions, have they been more fair than ones we've seen drawn by politicians themselves?
Yeah, they actually have been more fair. There are a number of studies that show, for example, that the trust in the legislature increases when you have a map that's been drawn by a commission. People that you have. One of the impacts of gerrymandering, which really is an evil thing, it has so many ways that it undermines our democracy. And one of them is that it tends to get rid of the middle. It tends to force people into these two armed camps, as I mentioned. And one of the things that a commission does is it gets rid of that mechanism to some extent. It doesn't, it's not going to be kumbaya the day after it's adopted, but it tends to prevent this, extreme partisan separation of the districts. So to have more competitive districts. You can't have all the districts are not going to be competitive. I live in Chapel Hill. Chapel Hill is going to elect Democrats. Phil Berger comes from Rockingham. Rockingham is going to elect Republicans. But the thing is, the overall composition of the legislature, there will be more seats that are really 50-50 and really up for grabs. And people in those seats have to run, in more moderate positions and pay attention to both sides to be able to win the election, which is what their plan is. So by creating more competitive seats, it tends to help in reducing that extreme partisanship. And that was seen again in California, where they found that the legislature found that there were more people in the middle. They could work together more. And you can really see in looking at the analysis of the U.S. Congress how it's gone from having a substantial overlap between the Democrats and the Republicans. It's just gone. So now there's no overlap at all. And we can see that in the gridlock, which makes it harder to come up with the reasonable solutions that really reflect what the people as a whole would like to see. So there are a lot of advantages besides the technical one of getting rid of rigged districts. But being able to hold them accountable, and by having more competitive districts is a big part of the advantage.
So what would it take to establish a nonpartisan commission in North Carolina?
Well, I mean, it's simple. We just have to get the legislators to vote for it. What could be easier, right? Um, and that obviously is something of a challenge, because the ability to draw your own district is just really appealing, and that also is used by whichever party is in power, Democrats or Republicans. They certainly give a little bit of opportunity for the other party to draw the districts, particularly where they're going to win anyway. But they can draw those safe districts for their legislators, and the legislators like that. Um, so um, so that makes it really difficult, and it's why it's so important for the real victims in this system, which are not necessarily really the elected officials of either party. The victims are us, the voters, whose voice is stifled, and who also suffer from this increasing rancor and inability to work together, and come up with the common sense solutions that have really been a hallmark of how North Carolina has operated in the past, and have led to a lot of progress in our state. So it's really up to us, the voters, to put the pressure on and say we want a better system. We think it's going to have to come step by step, beginning, as I mentioned, with process and criteria that are fairer. And we started down that route when the court ordered the redrawing. They said you must do this in the open. You cannot have a criterion like the Congress will be 10 and 3, which they actually voted on in committee in a previous congressional redistricting that was thrown out by the courts. They sat in the committee. I was in the room. I saw them do it, and they had up on the PowerPoint being shown. It said, and the partisan advantage, the Congress will have the same composition as it had before the court order, 10 and 3, and they did it. I mean, that's outrageous. So if people really come together, we can rule out extreme behavior like that. Even if the legislature is still drawing the maps, get maps that are fairer and give us make real progress towards getting a reform where the voters' voice can be heard.
Yeah, it's a long process, but it's definitely one worth fighting for sure. Well, thank you for your time today, Jennifer. Thanks for sharing this vital information. We will be back with another video on redistricting. I want to encourage everyone to go to the League of Women Voters of North Carolina website, get more information, subscribe to our email list, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. If you can donate to help us do this work and to help get more citizens across North Carolina involved, that would be wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Bye.